Hello and a big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett, and in today's presentation we're going to go through and take a look at the awk command, AWK. We're going to be able to see how we can use awk to go through and list all of the shells that are set up as default shells in our PassWD file. But not only that, we're going to be able to count how many occurrences of each shell. So it's a simple reporting mechanism that we can take a look at, but we're going to get you more used to using awk at the Linux command line. So come on, let's go through and find our command line. And look at this, I do believe I've found myself a command line shell. Now it really shouldn't matter which Linux distribution that you are working with. We happen to be working with Ubuntu, but what we're going to be seeing with awk is going to be vaguely familiar across all distributions of Linux. If you're using other variants, such as macOS being based around BSD or other Unix systems, then you might find a little bit of a difference. If I go through and run the hostnamectl command here, you can see that we are in fact using Ubuntu and 2004. But as I say, if you're using Linux, then you're going to find it doesn't really matter. Now we want to learn a little bit more about the command awk, AWK, and finding out how we can start becoming more familiar with this really powerful reporting tool. As we go through and take a look at it, we're going to be listing the shells that are in use in our etc PassWD file and how many occurrences of each shell. Now, of course, as we are working with the PassWD file, it is colon separated, and we can use then -F to specify the delimiter. Our awk command is going to be encapsulated inside of single quotes. And then we have a block of code. The unnamed block is the main block, and it never accepts a label, so it's just the brace brackets. And we can put the print function inside of this and then print out each line that we process from our PassWD file. Now you're going to start saying, well, look, this isn't really that exciting. It's working just like cat. Well, yes, but we're just getting used to it, aren't we? But we've put in a field delimiter. So that means that we can work with fields. We can make it more like cut, if you like, and then print out a certain field. So if I go through and put $7, $7 is the default shell for our users, and we can see then all of the listed shells. So brilliant, we've made it into cut. But we can extend it a little bit more if we want. If we want the username as well, we can go through and put $1, the first field is our username, and just separate it with a comma. So $1, comma, $7. So we can see now that we've got our username coming out. Now the main block, the unnamed block that we're working with in our code at the moment, is processed for each line that we come across. But we have other blocks that we can use. If I get rid of the -F at the moment, I can incorporate this in my main code if I add it to the begin block. With the begin block, we label it with the uppercase begin, and we create a new block of code with our brace brackets. The begin block is processed just once for each execution, rather than the main block, which is processed multiple times. If I set fs equals, and then our double quotes with a colon inside, I can set up the field separator, so I don't need to worry about the -F. And of course, then it's all working the same. Now, whilst this is good, we still want to do a little bit extra. The begin block can be used, as we've seen, for setting our file separator. But we can also go through, if I put a semicolon to separate the commands, we can use it to print header information. So if I want a title before all of my shells, we can then go through and print, and then the clear text string of what we want to print, and it's just going to be shells. If I go through now and execute it, shells will be printed once, But of course, then the main block will be processed for each line of code. If I scroll back up so we can see then my title, we can see there that I've got my header or title of shells. So again, this is getting a little bit better, but we're still not really where we want to be. We can take out $1, we don't really want our username, and we want to be working with $7, but not really in this way. Printing $7 is not really what we want to do. We can see then that we're just going to get a heap of output. We want a list of shells and the number of occurrences of each one of those shells. And of course, we can then go ahead and do that. But in our main block now, we're going to go through and populate a variable which we can reference later on. So we're going to have a variable called shells. We open up our square brackets. The square brackets is then really making shells an array. We're going to have then $7 being the entries in the array. $7, remember, is our shell. The value that we're setting for each one of our shells is just plus plus. That just means we're incrementing its current value. So every time we find a shell, we go through and increment its current value. This is a way we can count them. If I hit the big enter key now, you're probably not going to be that impressed because we just see shells. But that's because we haven't asked anything else to print. In our main block, all we're doing is just populating the array. And this is where we can then make use of our final and third block, the end block. Very much like the begin block, it is only processed once, but after the main block has been processed. So this means then that we can interrogate our array shells and start printing out some of that really useful information that we want to report on. So again, our end block is going to be in a block of code. So we're going to open up our brace brackets. And the first thing that we're going to implement here is a looping structure. So we can loop through our shells array. So for the argument for 4, we're going to go for shell. That's just a temporary variable that I am creating inside of the shells array that we created before. And then we specify what we want to do for each shell that we find. And of course, we want to go through and print them out. So back into our print function. And then we want to print out the shell singular variable. Now when we go through, this is getting quite useful. So we see then our shells, and then each one of our shells, but now only listed once. Each shell is listed just once in the array. But if we look at the value of each one of these array items, that will show me the count, how many times they appear in the file. And this is where it becomes really useful. So let's dig into this and go back into our code. So of course then just running our up arrow key, we can get back to our code, returning to our end block. We're going to go inside of our brace brackets after shell and we're going to put a comma. We just want to separate the arguments of the existing print statement. So as well as printing out the shell, we want to print out its value. So we can go into shells, open up our square bracket and put shell singular. So for each shell we find in the shells array, we're going to print out its value. Its value is going to be how many times it has occurred or our count. So this then starts becoming really functional. And if we hit the big enter key, we can now start seeing the power of awk as a reporting tool. Look at this. We've got our titled shells, and then we've got each one of our shells listed just once, so a unique list of shells, and then how many times they occur in the file. Now, sure, I do believe that we are just working with the parsewd file, But at least that's a file that we're all going to have. But we could use this in log files, maybe looking at IP addresses and how often they occur. These might be the ones that we want to start blocking if they're running malicious activities on our system. But really, it's almost limitless. And what we want to do is just look at some of the things that we can do and get you more comfortable with using Awk.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.